All right, so we're diving into a feud today that's got everyone talking.
Yeah.
Whoopi Goldberg, Donald Trump, a whole lot of drama. You ready to unpack this?
No, absolutely. This one's a whirlwind, pulling in politics, pop culture, you name it. It's a real study in clashing personalities and narratives.
Yeah, and it all started so innocently on The View, right?
Well, as innocent as things get on The View.
True, true. Kamala Harris is on, they're having a political discussion, and then, boom, Trump drops the bomb.
And not just any bomb, right? This was a series of calculated attacks at rallies, calling Whoopi filthy, disgusting, even demented. He even threw in a dumb for her co-host, just for good measure.
You know they love that, though. Gave him a whole week of material.
Oh, for sure. But here's where it gets interesting, the dirty part of it all.
Right. The next day, the View ladies waltz out to Christina Aguilera's Dirty. Talk about a power move.
Oh, absolutely. That song choice was deliberate. A direct response to Trump's words. Whoopi's basically reclaiming the word filthy, turning it on its head.
It's like she's saying, you want to call me dirty? Fine. I'll own it.
Exactly. It's a brilliant play on language, showing how words can be weapons, but also how they can be reclaimed. But this feud runs deeper than just insults. Trump adds fuel to the fire by bringing up this supposed past encounter with Whoopi.
Oh, you mean where he claims he hired her as a comedian and found her act so vulgar people started walking out?
Yeah, and he even went on to say he'd never hire her again. But, and here's the twist, Whoopi denies this whole thing, saying he actually hired her 4 times.
So who do you believe? It becomes a classic case of he said, she said.
Exactly. It really makes you question those narratives, right? How easily can they be manipulated, especially by someone like Trump, who's a master of media?
This is like a real-life game of chess, with each move so carefully planned.
Absolutely. And it raises questions about power dynamics, who gets to control the narrative, and what happens when those narratives clash.
You know, it's like we're watching this train wreck in slow motion. You can almost predict what Trump's next move will be.
Right, and it's often a tactic of distraction, right? Throw out a shocking statement, and suddenly everyone's talking about that, instead of, say, more pressing issues.
And in this case, that shocking statement involves calling Whoopi a loser. Like he's trying to write her off entirely.
It's a way to discredit her without actually engaging with her arguments, you know? Instead of addressing what she's saying, he tries to paint her as relevant, someone not worth listening to.
It's like he's saying, don't even bother with her, she's yesterday's news. But the thing is, Whoopi doesn't back down. In fact, she hits back harder.
Oh, she definitely does. And her response is all the more powerful because she owns it. She doesn't shy away from those labels, she turns them around.
Right, it's almost like she's saying, you think you can define me, think again.
And she backs it up with her own experiences. She reminds everyone about his failed casino venture, essentially turning the tables on his judgment.
Oh, that was a good one. Like, let's not forget who has a history of bad decisions here. But it's not just Whoopi who's pushing back, right? Her co-hosts on The View really rally around her.
Absolutely. Sunny Hostin, with her legal background, even jokes that Trump is practically giving them material for future shows.
Talk about turning lemons into lemonade, right?
Exactly. And then there's Alyssa Farah Griffin, who worked with Trump directly. She brings a really interesting perspective, pointing out that he has a history of going after women who challenge him.
It's like this whole thing becomes a much bigger conversation about power dynamics and how women are treated when they speak out, especially in male-dominated spaces.
Absolutely. But even beyond that, this feud raises some really interesting questions about priorities. I mean, of all the things happening in the world, Trump chooses to fixate on The View.
It's almost like he's more concerned with controlling the narrative around a daytime talk show than addressing actual issues, you know? It makes you wonder.
It really does. And Whoopi actually calls him out on this, doesn't she? She points out that he seems more focused on them than on, say, I don't know, actual world events.
And she does it with a touch of humor, suggesting everyone secretly watches the show.
Which is a brilliant strategy, right? It diffuses the tension while still making a point.
It does make you wonder what it says about someone when they're so obsessed with controlling the narrative around something like a talk show.
Right. What are you so afraid of? What are you trying to hide?
It's almost like this primal need to control the message, no matter how small or insignificant it might seem in the grand scheme of things.
Exactly. And that's what makes this whole feud so fascinating, right? It might seem like a trivial Hollywood spat on the surface, but underneath it speaks to these larger anxieties about truth, power, and who gets to control the narrative.
And it really highlights the importance of critical thinking, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. We can't just passively consume information anymore. We have to be active participants, questioning what we see and hear, looking for those hidden agendas and power plays.
Because these battles for narrative control, they're happening everywhere, not just on our TV screens.
Exactly. They're in our workplaces, our communities, even our own families. Understanding how these dynamics work is essential for navigating the world today.
It's like they say knowledge is power. And in this case, understanding how these narratives are constructed, that's the first step to reclaiming our own voices.
And ensuring that those voices are heard.
It really makes you think twice about everything you see and hear, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. We're living in this age of information overload, and it's so easy to get swept up in whatever narrative is loudest or most pervasive. But this whole Whoopi and Trump situation, it's like a masterclass in media manipulation.
It shows you how even something that seems like a personal feud can tap into these bigger societal anxieties and power struggles.
Right, and it underscores the importance of being informed, critical thinkers. We can't just accept everything at face value. We have to question those motives, look for those hidden agendas, and be aware of how language is being used to shape our perceptions.
It's like that old saying, don't believe everything you read. But now it's like, don't believe everything you see, hear, or scroll past.
Exactly, and it's not about being cynical or distrustful of everything. It's about being savvy consumers of information. It's about understanding that everyone has an agenda, and sometimes those agendas are less than transparent.
So how do we do that? How do we become more discerning, more critical of the information thrown at us?
Well, for starters, diversify your media diet. Don't just get your news from one source, especially not just social media. Expose yourself to different perspectives, even if they make you uncomfortable. And don't be afraid to ask questions.
That's such a simple but powerful point. We often forget to ask those basic questions. Who's saying this? Why are they saying it? What's their agenda?
Right. And look for those underlying biases. Everyone has them, and they can color the way we interpret and present information. Once you start recognizing those biases, both in yourself and in others, you become much more aware of how narratives are constructed.
It's like taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture, right? Zooming out to see the whole landscape instead of just focusing on one little detail.
Precisely. And remember, this isn't just about politics or celebrity gossip. These same dynamics play out in every aspect of our lives.
In our workplaces, our families, even our personal relationships. It's about understanding the power of language, the way we use it to influence and persuade, to shape perceptions, and ultimately to get what we want.
It's about recognizing that words have power and that power can be used for good or for ill. So choose your words wisely and be mindful of the words of others.
It's been enlightening, to say the least. This whole deep dive into the Whoopi-Trump feud has really opened my eyes to the subtle and not so subtle ways that narratives are constructed and manipulated all around us.
It's been a pleasure unpacking this with you. Remember, the conversation doesn't end here. Keep asking those tough questions, challenge those assumptions, and never underestimate the power of a good deep dive.